Imagine waking on a silent beach with no ship, no companions, and no clear hope of rescue. Everything you owned is gone. Everyone you knew may be dead. And somewhere beyond the trees you have no idea what dangers may be waiting. This is Robinson Crusoe by Daniel Defoe. After ignoring every warning and choosing a life at sea, Crusoe is caught in a disaster that leaves him stranded alone on a remote island. At first, survival is the only challenge. He must find food, build shelter, protect himself, and learn how to live with almost nothing. But as the years pass, loneliness becomes its own kind of enemy. Then one day, Crusoe finds something in the sand that changes everything: a human footprint. From that moment, the island no longer feels empty. And before the story is over, Crusoe will face fear, danger, friendship, violence, and the unsettling question of whether isolation has saved him, changed him, or trapped him forever. I'm Roger Braveheart, and a very warm welcome to the 33-Minute Stories channel. These stories are for anyone who has ever wished they had read the great classics at school, but never quite got around to it. Because the story is read to you, you can leave it playing in the background, carry on with another task, and simply listen as the extraordinary world of Robinson Crusoe unfolds. By the end, you'll understand the story well enough to enjoy it, remember it, and sound a little more well-read when it comes up in conversation. My challenge is to summarize the entire book as an enjoyable story lasting approximately 33 minutes. Wish me luck. Okay, so without further delay, let's get cracking. Robinson Crusoe is born in the city of York in 1632, the third son of a comfortable trading family. From boyhood, his head is filled with dreams of the sea, and nothing his parents say can shake them loose. His father, a wise and ailing man, calls him in one morning and pleads with him to stay at home, telling him that the middle station of life is the happiest place in the world, free from the miseries of the poor and the pride and envy of the great. He warns his son that if he throws this away, God will not bless him, and he will one day have leisure to repent with no one to help him. Crusoe is moved to tears, and for a few days he resolves to settle down. But the resolution wears off. At 18, without asking his father's blessing or even sending word, he boards a ship at Hull bound for London. Almost at once the sea rises against him. In the first storm he is terrified and vows to go home like a repenting prodigal, but calm weather and a bowl of punch wash the promise away. Days later, in Yarmouth Roads, a far worse tempest sinks the ship beneath the crew, who barely escape in a boat. The ship's master, a grave and religious man, warns Crusoe plainly that heaven has given him a sign, and that he ought never to go to sea again. Shame keeps him from going home, so instead he travels to London and looks for another voyage. A friendly captain takes him on a trading voyage to the coast of Africa, and it proves the one success of his young life. He comes home with gold dust and the beginnings of a fortune. But on the next voyage, his ship is attacked by a Turkish pirate out of Sallee, and Crusoe, the would-be gentleman merchant, is made a slave to the pirate captain. For 2 years he does the drudgery of the household, watching for any chance of escape. It comes at last when his master sends him out fishing in a well-fitted longboat with a Moor and a boy called Jury. Crusoe quietly stocks the boat with food, water, tools and guns, tosses the Moor overboard within easy swimming distance of shore, and sails away south along the wild African coast with Jury, who swears to be faithful to him. They anchor in strange creeks by night, terrified by the roaring of unseen beasts, land cautiously for fresh water, and at one point shoot a great lion asleep on the shore, taking its skin to lie upon. Free at last, but far from any friendly harbour, they keep sailing south in hope of meeting a European ship. For days, Crusoe and Jury creep southward along the African shore, going in for fresh water only when they must, hoping to reach the region where European ships trade. At last, they see people on the beach, black and naked, who prove friendly, running along the shore and leaving dried meat and corn for the strangers to fetch. While the boat lies by, 2 great beasts come raging down from the mountains into the sea, and Crusoe shoots one dead in the water. The people are astonished at the noise and fire of his gun, and when he gives them the creature, a fine spotted leopard, they take its flesh and give him the skin and more provisions. Soon afterwards, rounding a great point of land, Jury cries out that he sees a ship. It is Portuguese, and its captain proves a rare and generous friend. He takes Crusoe aboard, refuses any payment for saving him, buys his boat, and even takes Yuri into his service, under a promise to free the boy in 10 years if he turns Christian. Carried safely to Brazil, Crusoe settles as a planter, learns the sugar trade, and over 4 years grows steadily prosperous, often reflecting that he might as well have stayed at home, since he is now living exactly the middle life his father recommended. But restlessness wins again. Neighbouring planters persuade him to sail as their agent on a secret voyage to Guinea, to fetch slaves for their plantations, and on the 1st of September, 8 years to the day since he ran away from his parents, he goes aboard in an evil hour. A hurricane drives the ship far off her course, and in a second storm she strikes a sandbank in sight of a wild shore. 11 men take to the boat, a mountainous wave overturns it, and Crusoe alone is thrown, half dead, upon the beach. Every other soul is drowned. He spends his first night in a tree, with nothing about him but a knife, a pipe, and a little tobacco. In the morning the wreck lies close to shore, and over the following days he builds rafts and strips her of everything he can carry: bread, rice, rum, tools, guns, powder, sails, clothes, ironwork, even pens, ink, paper, 3 Bibles, a dog, and 2 cats. Climbing a hill, he discovers to his great affliction that he is on a barren island, apparently uninhabited. He pitches his tent against a rock, fortifies it with a half-circle of driven stakes and ship's cable, and digs a cave behind it for a cellar. He divides his gunpowder into small parcels for fear of lightning, kills goats for food, sets up a great cross to keep his calendar, weighs the evil of his condition against the good he can still be thankful for, and, with a table and chair made by his own untaught hands, begins to keep a journal. He writes the story over again in his journal, beginning with the miserable day he came ashore on what he calls the Island of Despair. Through the autumn rains he labours at his dwelling. He ferries goods from the wreck until a storm breaks her to pieces, fixes his tent beneath the rock, raises his fence and digs into the sandy stone to enlarge his cave, propping the roof with posts after part of it falls in and nearly buries him. Having no proper tools, he makes a spade from a piece of iron-hard wood, contrives a hod for carrying earth, and rigs a wheel and string to turn his heavy grindstone with his foot. He lames a young goat, nurses it until it grows tame, and first considers breeding creatures against the day his powder runs out. Then comes a wonder. Having shaken out an old bag of spoiled chicken feed by the rock, he is astonished weeks later to find perfect green barley growing there, along with stalks of rice, in a climate he knows is wrong for corn. At first he takes it for a miracle sent purely for his sustenance, and though the wonder fades when he remembers the bag, he carefully saves every ear for seed. A violent earthquake shakes the island 3 times, toppling rock into the sea, and is followed by a dreadful hurricane. He resolves to move his home from beneath the overhanging hill, then gradually settles for strengthening what he has. The earthquake heaves the wreck up out of the sand, and for weeks he works at her with saw and crowbar, bringing away timber, iron, and lead. Then, in June, sickness strikes, a violent ague, fits of shivering and burning, and no living soul to help him. In a fevered dream he sees a man descend from a black cloud in flames, raising a spear and saying that since all these things have not brought him to repentance, now he shall die. Terrified, he looks back for the first time at his whole godless life, the ignored warnings, the deliverances never once acknowledged, the storms and slavery and escapes that never turned his thoughts toward heaven. His father's prophecy comes home to him, and he cries out the first real prayer of his life. Searching a chest for tobacco to physic himself, he finds one of the Bibles and opens it upon the words, "Call on me in the day of trouble, and I will deliver thee." He kneels and prays, sleeps long and deep, and slowly recovers. From then on, he reads scripture every morning and evening, begs sincerely for repentance, and comes to understand deliverance in a wholly new way. Deliverance from the guilt of his past life now matters more to him than deliverance from the island itself. After 10 months ashore with his home secure, Crusoe sets out to survey his kingdom. Up the creek he finds fresh meadows, tobacco growing wild, aloes and wild sugar canes. Further on, melons on the ground and ripe grapes hanging from the trees, which he dries in the sun for raisins. Beyond a ridge he descends into a fresh green valley so flourishing it seems like a planted garden, and he looks over it with a secret pleasure, reflecting that he is king and lord of all this country. There he builds a bower, a country house ringed with a double hedge, though he decides against moving there permanently, since only the coast offers any hope of spotting a ship. The rains confine him for weeks. One of his cats returns with kittens, the beginning of a plague of cats, and on the anniversary of his landing he keeps a solemn fast, confessing his sins and giving thanks. He learns by hard experience that the year divides into rainy and dry seasons, losing his first sowing of precious barley and rice by planting at the wrong time, but mastering the rhythm at last and reckoning on 2 harvests a year. The stakes of his hedges take root and grow into living trees, and their twigs supply him with material to weave baskets, a craft he remembers from watching a basket maker as a boy. Then he crosses the island to the far shore, where on a clear day he can plainly see land far off to the west, which he judges must lie near the Spanish dominions, perhaps the coast of the cannibals. He decides he is better off where he is. That side of the island proves the richer, with countless turtles and fowl, and there he knocks down a young parrot, which he names Pole, and slowly teaches to speak. His dog surprises a kid, which he tames until it follows him about like a pet. On his 2nd anniversary he reflects that he is happier in this solitary life than he ever was in his wicked past, comforted by the words he finds in his Bible, that God will never leave him nor forsake him. His days settle into a pattern of reading, hunting, and labour, everything costing enormous toil, 42 days to make a single shelf board. When his little crop of corn comes up, goats and hares crop the blades until he fences the ground, and then birds descend on the ripening ears until he shoots 3 and hangs them up like thieves in chains, which frightens the rest away for good. He harvests about 2 bushels each of rice and barley, and resolves to save it all for seed, setting himself to solve the long chain of problems, grinding, sifting, baking, that stand between a handful of corn and a loaf of bread. To grow enough corn, Crusoe prepares more land, fences 2 large fields with living hedges, and, while the rains keep him indoors, works away at the great problem of bread. He teaches Pole to say his name, the first word ever spoken on the island by any mouth but his own. After months of failures with heavy collapsing clay, he manages 2 great ugly earthen jars, and then makes a discovery that delights him beyond measure. A broken potsherd burnt in his cooking fire comes out hard as stone, and by piling his pots in the heart of a wood fire, he learns to burn earthenware that will hold water and stand the flames. With his first fireproof pot, he boils meat and makes good broth. He hollows a great block of hardwood into a mortar for pounding grain, makes sieves from calico neckcloths saved from the wreck, and bakes barley loaves on a hot hearth under upturned earthen pans, becoming in time a tolerable pastry cook. His harvests grow until he has 40 bushels in store, but his eyes keep turning to the land he saw across the water, and the longing to escape returns. The ship's boat lies overturned on the beach, far too heavy to move, so he resolves to make a canoe from a tree and fells a mighty cedar. He spends months hacking and shaping it into a handsome vessel big enough for 26 men, and only then faces what he never once considered. It lies 100 yards from the water. No strength of his can move it, and a canal to float it would take a dozen years to dig. He gives it up, having learned too late the folly of beginning a work before counting the cost. On his 4th anniversary, he reflects how little possessions matter beyond use. His hoard of gold and silver lies mouldering in a drawer, and he would trade the whole heap for a handful of seeds, or a bottle of ink. He patches clothes from goat skins, makes a clumsy fur cap and an umbrella covered with skins. Later he builds a second, smaller canoe, digs a canal, launches it, fits it with mast and sail, and sets off to circle the island. Off the eastern point, a furious current seizes the little boat and drags him helplessly out to sea, and he looks back at his desolate island as the most pleasant place in the world, crying out that he shall never see it more. A saving eddy and a rising breeze carry him back to the northern shore, where he falls on his knees in thanks and swears off such voyages. Walking home, he sleeps at his bower and wakes in terror at a voice calling, "Poor Robin Crusoe, where are you?" It is only Pole perched on the hedge. With his powder running low, he turns to trapping goats in pitfalls, takes 3 kids alive and fences pasture for them. Within a couple of years he has a flock of 43, and to his delight, milk, butter and cheese besides, a table spread for him in the wilderness. By now, Crusoe lives like a strange little monarch, dining alone attended by his parrot, his old dog, and 2 cats, wanting nothing but human society. Dressed in his goatskin cap, jacket and breeches, with his basket, gun and clumsy skin umbrella, he cuts a figure that would frighten or amuse anyone in England. Then one day, about noon, going toward his boat, he is thunderstruck by the print of a man's naked foot on the sand, toes, heel, every part of a foot, with no other mark anywhere near it. He flies home terrified, looking behind him at every step, mistaking every bush for a man, and sleeps not at all. At first he fancies it must be the devil, then, more dreadfully, that savages from the mainland have been ashore and might find his boat, his fields, his goats, and finally himself. Fear banishes all his religious comfort for a time, and he even thinks of tearing down his enclosures and destroying his corn so that no sign of habitation remains. He half persuades himself the print was his own foot, until he measures it and finds it far larger than his own. So he sets to work. He thickens his wall to 10 feet, plants 7 muskets through holes like cannon, and sets thousands of stakes outside, which within a few years grow into a grove so thick that no one could guess a dwelling lay behind it. He hides part of his goat flock in a second enclosure deep in the woods, so that no disaster can strip him of them all. Then, exploring the far southwest point of the island, he comes upon a sight that turns his stomach, the shore spread with skulls, hands, feet and bones of men, and a fire pit where cannibals have sat at their horrid feasts. Sickened, he thanks God he was cast ashore on the other side of the island, and for nearly 2 years he keeps close, scarcely daring to fire a gun or make a smoke. His mind fills for a while with schemes of ambushing the savages and slaughtering them at their feast, until cooler thought turns him around. They have done him no wrong, they do not know their custom is a crime, and it is not for him to be judge and executioner over people whom heaven has left to their own ways. He resolves to leave them to divine justice unless they attack him first, and quietly moves his boat to a hidden cove out of their reach. Cutting wood for charcoal so he can cook without telltale smoke, he stumbles upon a natural cave behind a thicket and is nearly frightened out of his wits by 2 shining eyes in the dark. Only a monstrous old he-goat, dying of mere age. Beyond a low passage the cave opens into a dry, glittering grotto, and there he stores his powder and spare arms, feeling at last that no enemy could ever find him. In his 23rd year on the island, so settled that he could almost be content to end his days there, Crusoe goes out early one December morning and sees firelight on the shore, on his own side of the island. From the hilltop, with his spying glass, he watches 9 naked savages around a fire with 2 canoes drawn up, and when the tide turns, they paddle away. Going down afterwards, he finds the blood, bones, and half-eaten flesh of their feast, and his old fury returns. He resolves to destroy the next party that comes, and for over a year he watches in a murdering humour, sleeping badly and dreaming of killing. Then one stormy May night he hears guns fired at sea, a ship in distress. He builds a great fire on the hill as an answer, and keeps it burning all night. At daybreak he makes out a wreck lying broken on the hidden rocks far out, the very rocks whose eddy once saved his own life. No soul appears to have survived, and a longing seizes him more fiercely than anything he has known. Oh, that even one man had been saved, one companion, one fellow creature to speak to. Only a drowned boy washes ashore. He ventures out in his canoe to the wreck, a Spanish ship, and finds 2 men drowned in each other's arms, and 1 living creature, a half-starved dog which he takes in. He carries off chests, liquor, shirts, and a good store of money and gold. Treasure he values less than the shoes on the dead men's feet, for money is dirt to him there. 2 more restless years pass, his head full of schemes of escape, until one sleepless night he dreams that savages land with a prisoner who breaks free, runs to his grove, and becomes his servant and pilot to the mainland. He resolves to get himself one of their prisoners, whatever it costs. A year and a half later, 5 canoes come ashore, and 30 savages dance around their fire. 2 victims are dragged out, 1 is butchered, and the other suddenly bolts, straight toward Crusoe's part of the island, with 3 pursuers behind him. Crusoe places himself between them, knocks the first down with his gunstock, shoots the second dead, and the trembling fugitive comes near, kneels, kisses the ground, and sets Crusoe's foot upon his own head in token of everlasting service. The man is young, handsome, and quick. He beheads the stunned pursuer with Crusoe's sword, and buries both bodies in the sand. Crusoe names him Friday, after the day of his rescue, teaches him to say master, yes and no, feeds and clothes him, and lodges him between the 2 walls of his fortress. All caution proves needless. Never had a man a more faithful, loving, sincere servant, and Crusoe's hard, solitary life begins at last to turn sweet. To break Friday of his old appetite, Crusoe feeds him kid boiled into broth and roasted on a string before the fire, and Friday declares he will never eat man's flesh again. He learns to beat and sift corn to bake bread, and to do every part of the island's work as well as his master. They fence new fields, for there are 2 mouths to feed now, and Friday works with cheerful devotion. It becomes the pleasantest year of Crusoe's whole time there. As Friday's English grows, Crusoe questions him about the mainland, the mouth of a great river, his nation, the Caribs, and, most startling of all, 17 white-bearded men, shipwrecked Spaniards and Portuguese, who have lived 4 years among Friday's people, kept alive by a truce. Crusoe also labours at Friday's soul, teaching him of the true God in place of the mountain god of his people, and finds him an apt scholar with awkward questions of his own. When told that God is stronger than the devil, Friday asks why God does not simply kill the devil, and Crusoe, more sincere than learned, is quite run down and must pray for wisdom before he can answer. Teaching the savage, he confesses, instructs the teacher, and the years they spend together are, he says, perfectly and completely happy. When Crusoe, in a jealous fit, tests whether Friday longs to return home, Friday will not hear of going without his master, and, hurt at the very suggestion of being sent away, hands Crusoe a hatchet and bids him take it and kill Friday rather than send Friday away. Together they fell a great tree and build a large canoe fitted with mast, sail, and rudder, meaning to sail for the mainland and the stranded white men. But before the voyage can begin, Friday comes flying back from the shore one morning, crying that canoes have come. 3 boats and 21 savages have landed near the creek with prisoners for their feast, and 1 victim, Friday reports, is a bearded white man. That fires Crusoe's very soul. He and Friday load every musket, pistol, and fowling piece they own, creep through the woods, and open fire on the crowd from cover. In the panic and slaughter that follow, they kill or wound most of the party. Crusoe cuts the bound white man free, a Spaniard, who, armed with pistol and sword, fights his own would-be butchers like a fury. In one of the canoes they find yet another prisoner tied hand and foot, and when Friday looks into the man's face, he falls into a passion of kissing, weeping, laughing, and dancing. It is his own father. Only 4 savages escape by sea. Crusoe carries the 2 weak rescued men home, builds them a tent, and reflects merrily that his island is now peopled, a king with 3 subjects, of 3 different religions, and liberty of conscience throughout his dominions. From the Spaniard, Crusoe learns that 16 more of his countrymen still live in misery on the mainland, without tools, arms, or hope. Crusoe fears treachery. An Englishman handed over in a Spanish colony could expect no mercy. But the Spaniard swears loyalty, and gives one piece of advice so prudent that the rescue is postponed. With 4 mouths already, the corn will never feed a score more, so they must first plant and wait for another harvest. All 4 dig and sow, and in time bring in over 200 bushels of barley beside the rice. Then the Spaniard and Friday's father set off in a canoe to fetch the stranded men, carrying bread, raisins, and muskets, and a solemn charge that every man must swear to be under Crusoe's command. 8 days later, Friday comes running with news of a boat, but it is not the expected party. An English longboat is pulling for the shore, with a ship at anchor beyond, and Crusoe, warned by a secret unease, keeps hidden. 11 men land, 3 of them bound. The prisoners are left in despair on the sand while the rest straggle off, and their boat grounds on the ebbing tide. Crusoe approaches the 3 and startles them half out of their wits. The chief captive is the ship's captain, betrayed by a mutinous crew who mean to maroon him, with his mate and a passenger, on what they take for a desert island. Crusoe offers deliverance on 2 conditions: that on the island his authority is absolute, and that if the ship is recovered, he and Friday get free passage to England. The captain agrees with all his heart. Armed by Crusoe, his little party surprises the sleeping mutineers, kills the 2 worst, and binds the rest, who beg for mercy. They stave the longboat so it cannot be carried off, and soon a second boat comes from the ship with 10 armed men. Crusoe divides his prisoners, sending the most dangerous, well-guarded, to the far cave, while Friday and the mate lure the searchers deep into the island by hallooing from hill to hill until dark, leaving them exhausted and lost. The boat-keepers are surprised and taken. Then in the night, the captain and Friday shoot down the boatswain, the ringleader of the whole mutiny, and the rest are summoned to surrender by an invisible governor, supposedly commanding 50 men. They all yield. With picked hands, some sworn afresh, the captain boards the ship at midnight, retakes her deck by deck, and shoots the rebel captain dead. 7 guns fired from the ship give Crusoe the agreed signal, and at daybreak the captain embraces him on the shore, pointing to the vessel. There is his ship and his deliverance. Crusoe, dressed at last in the captain's good clothes, plays the governor one final time, the worst of the mutineers, facing the gallows in England, choose instead to be left on the island, and he generously teaches them everything, the corn, the goats, the grapes, and leaves a letter for the Spaniards he expects to return. At the last moment, 2 of the 5 men left behind swim off to the ship, begging to be taken aboard rather than face their companions, and after a sound whipping they prove quiet, honest fellows. On the 19th of December 1686, carrying his goatskin cap, his umbrella, one of his parrots, and his long useless money, Crusoe leaves the island after 28 years, 2 months, and 19 days, and reaches England in June 1687, 35 years after he first ran away, as perfect a stranger as if he had never been known there. His father and mother are dead, and nothing has been kept for him. Only the widow who once held his money in trust is alive, poor and honest, and he relieves her as far as his small stock allows. So he travels to Lisbon, Friday still faithfully at his side, and finds his old friend the Portuguese captain, now aged and retired. The old man gives him an exact and honest account. The Brazil plantation has flourished for decades, his partner has grown rich, and Crusoe's share, carefully recorded all along, is waiting to be claimed. When the papers and goods arrive, Crusoe finds himself suddenly master of above £5,000 and an estate worth £1,000 a year, and the joy so overwhelms him that he nearly dies of it until a physician bleeds him. He rewards the good old captain handsomely, settles an income on him and his son, sends money to the widow and to his 2 sisters, and then, seized by a strange dread of the sea, 2 ships he had picked out for the voyage both miscarried. He resolves to travel home, overland. From Lisbon the party rides through Spain and is trapped by early snow at the foot of the mountains, where a guide leads them over by winding ways. Wolves attack the guide, and Friday gallops up and shoots one dead. Then comes Friday's great comedy. Spying a huge bear, he begs leave to make everyone laugh, teases the beast into chasing him, lures it up an oak, dances it on a bending bough, and finally, as it climbs back down the trunk, claps his pistol to its ear and kills it, roaring with laughter. But the laughter dies on the plain beyond, where hundreds of famished wolves surround the travellers in the dusk. Formed in a triangle behind fallen timber, they beat off charge after charge with volleys, and, at the last, a train of gunpowder fired along the log, killing 80 wolves before the pack finally flees. They reach Toulouse, then Paris, then Calais, and Crusoe lands at Dover in January, with all his newfound wealth safe. He sells the Brazil plantation for a fortune, marries and has 3 children, and after his wife dies, the old restlessness wins one last time. In 1694, he sails with his nephew and revisits his island, finds the Spaniards and the marooned Englishmen settled there with wives and children, leaves them supplies, workmen and livestock, and promises stranger adventures yet to come. When I finish telling this story, I always return to its very first scene. A sick old father pleading with his son to be content with the quiet middle station of life. I believe that scene holds the key to the whole book. Crusoe himself calls his disobedience his original sin, and tells us plainly that not being satisfied with the station where God and nature placed him was the source of half his miseries. Every disaster in the tale follows a moment when he had enough and reached for more. He leaves a comfortable home for the sea, he leaves a thriving plantation for one greedy voyage, and each time the sea repays him with ruin. So the book suggests, I think, that restlessness and discontent are quiet destroyers, and that the ordinary, unglamorous life so many of us hurry past may actually be the happiest ground a person can stand on. But I do not think it is only a warning. It is also, I believe, a story about providence and repentance. Crusoe treats the island at first as a curse, and slowly comes to see it as a mercy. He says himself that the evil we most seek to shun often proves the very door of our deliverance. It takes sickness, a terrifying dream, and utter solitude before he ever truly prays. And when he does, the deliverance he asks for changes. Freedom from the guilt of his past life comes to matter more than rescue from the island. The author may be telling us that a person can be delivered inwardly long before circumstances change, and that no condition is so miserable that there is nothing in it to be thankful for. Crusoe's careful list of evils set against goods, and his heap of gold mouldering uselessly in a drawer, both point the same way. Things are only worth the use we can make of them, and gratitude is worth more than possessions. I am also struck by the humanity that creeps into the story. Crusoe rages against the cannibals, then reasons himself out of slaughtering them, concluding that it is not his place to be judge and executioner over people who do not know their custom is a crime, and he condemns the cruelties committed by conquerors in America in the same breath. In Friday, he finds the same reason: affection, gratitude, and fidelity he would find in any man of his own country, and he says as much. The story highlights, I think, that these capacities belong to all people. Above all, I believe the author wanted us to see that patience, labour, and faith can rebuild a life from nothing, and that we never truly see the value of what we have until we are made to live without it. Thank you for staying till the end of the life and adventures of Robinson Crusoe. You obviously are a glutton for punishment. Please hit the like icon if you thought this video deserves it, so other people get to see it. Let me know in the comments which book you would like me to read to you next. Now, YouTube have put on screen a channel subscribe icon, and below it, my latest video for you to check out. See you next time.